Next time you need to see a doctor, don't go to a doctor. Call Team Wellness Online. With Team Wellness Online, you can see a doctor or a therapist without waiting, usually within 24 hours. Your televisit is private and 100% secure, and you can take all the time you want. So next time you need to see a doctor or therapist, call Team Wellness Online at 888-813-TEAM to make a virtual appointment, and we'll come to you.
Welcome to My Healthy Mind. I'm Michael Hunter. Today we're talking with a man with an incredible story. A man who as a teenager was sentenced to life in prison without parole, who for 29 years fought on his own until his verdict was successfully overturned. A man who went on to work for the very system and the very institutions that had imprisoned him in the first place, as an advocate for people who should have been diverted or otherwise treated. People who, like himself, found themselves hopelessly mired in the criminal justice system. Focusing mainly on helping children steer clear of violence and crime, this man has spent the last 5 years advocating on their behalf. Now a much decorated citizen and mental health champion, Daryl Woods has become a model of how to turn bitter into better. Stay with us. Daryl Woods, welcome to My Healthy Mind.
Thank you for having me.
Daryl, you have a fascinating, if harrowing story, beginning with growing up with your grandma, if I'm correct?
Yes.
Can you take us from that beginning of your story?
Absolutely. I was very, very young when my grandmother took me in because when my mother was pregnant with me, my biological father died. And when he died, my mother had 3 other children, and then she had me. She had a breakdown, and she ran to drugs and eventually got hooked on heroin, which made my grandmother had to raise me and my 3 other siblings. And, growing up with my grandmother was very, very beautiful in the sense that I did have some love in that home, and she took me to church and tried to do the best she could. She had 11 other children outside, well, she had 10 other children along with my mother, which made 11 children. And so my 3 siblings and myself is there along with so many other children. Her house was like a transit station for children. And so we were very much crowded, but she did her best to try to raise us in that situation.
And when you were growing up, did you do well? What kind of kid were you with your grandmother?
I started off doing good. I had a passion to go to school. I wanted to do the right thing. But because we grew up in what I would consider poverty at that time, I didn't know how poor we was until I got older. We had food stamps, and it was kind of embarrassing to go into the supermarket with food stamps. We shopped at the Goodwill. It was a struggle, but she did her very, very best to raise us in the fear and admonition of the Lord, and took us to church throughout the week. We went on Sundays, we went on Wednesdays, we went on Saturday nights. We was a church-going family. My mother at that time, she was down in the Cass Quarters. The Cass Quarters was considered the Vietnam of Detroit. I had a desire to be with her. I miss my mother. I love my mother. I didn't understand why she wasn't there and why I wasn't with her. And so I eventually ran away from home and to go find my mother. Down there, you had people who were addicted and afflicted. You had the pimps, the prostitutes, you had the drug dealers, you had everything going on down there. And I found her, And she tried to send me back once, and I came back, and I told her, I wanted to be with her. Down in the Cavs quarters, it was just a world a whole different world. At that time, I connected myself with the wrong crowd down there. Down there, there was drug organizations down there, major drug organizations down there. The Young Boys Incorporated was down there. The Pony Crew was down there. The Best Friends and the Chamber Brothers and all these drug organizations. And they had young people down there, and they exploited a lot of young people to sell those drugs for them, because the young people would get less time. They would go to juvenile or something like that if they got caught by the police. And I end up starting to sell marijuana to some of the local drug dealers.
And something happened to you when you were just 14.
By that time, I was deep into the drug game. I was on the corner selling drugs. A gentleman had a sawed-off shotgun about to shoot me in the back of my head, and I was turning around, and he eventually shot me in my arm. Right here, I got a bullet hole in my arm. Got that when I was 14 years old. There was a cab driver there. The cab driver rushed to me and took me to Mark Carmel Hospital. I stayed in the hospital for a month. And back then, they would keep you there and take care of you. But one thing they didn't give me while I was there, I had no counseling. 14 years old, shot, about to be killed. No one ministered to my mental health. No one talked to me about the trauma that I had just experienced, about to lose my life, almost losing my arm. And I was in that hospital and left that hospital 30 days later.
So about this time, you were 14 when you dropped out of school?
14 years old, I dropped out of school.
Did the shooting have anything to do with that, or?
It happened simultaneously with, actually, my lifestyle had a lot to do with that, because I was leaving from school and going into the Brewster Projects to sell drugs. The last school I went to was Spain Elementary Middle School at that time. And I didn't finish the 8th grade, so I dropped out of the 8th grade. And so I chose the streets and making money up as opposed to going to school. And so dropped out of school. 16, I have a son. 17, I have a daughter. 18 years old, I'm in serious trouble.
Talk to us about that trouble. What happened?
18 years old, I was 18 years old in 1 month. I found myself inside a drug house. Me and my little cousin, who had been working with me in the drug game, he had just turned 17, I had just turned 18. We're inside a drug house where a drug deal took place. We were there to get marijuana, and while we were there, a gentleman was handling a cocaine deal. These two gentlemen got into an argument and dispute about the price of the drugs. A gun was pulled out, and when that gun was pulled out, the deceased in the case ran to the back bedroom, and the gunman ran behind him. It was arguing, shouting, glass breaking, and then shooting. After that, bedlam was in the home. And so it was 7 of us in the home. The house was dead-bolted. The door was dead-bolted. There was bars on the window. So we were pretty much stuck in this home, fighting to get out. We was breaking windows, trying to find a window to get up out of there. Eventually, my co-defendant, who was my little cousin, broke out a window that didn't have bars on it, and everyone fled the home. I eventually fled to the state of Florida, and while I was in Florida, they caught me and then subsequently extradited me back to the state of Michigan. Me and my co-defendant got found guilty as aiding and abettors, and we were condemned to life without the possibility of parole in prison in the Michigan Department of Corrections. I was sentenced to die there.
At Team Wellness Primary Care Center, you will find all the basic services you need to be well and stay well. Come in for all your screenings. Come in for routine physicals and checkups. Come in for full-service dentistry. Come in for vaccinations and immunizations. At Team Wellness Primary Care Center, we take care of your total health. Team Wellness Primary Care Center. Come on in.
You ultimately served 29 years in prison, right?
Absolutely. Served 28 years and 11 months, 29 years.
And what was that like?
It started off like hell on earth. They sent me to the Michigan Reformatory, AKA Gladiator School. It was a whole old prehistoric prison that had bars and brick everywhere. It looked like a castle. The segregation was called the graves there, because if you go there, you're gonna spend years inside the hole. I watched people get stabbed, I watched people get their head cracked, but I also watched people transform their lives. I watched people educate themselves and empower themselves with the skills and the tools that they needed. And so I was at a fork in the road. Either I was going to be a man and a father, or I was going to be a prisoner and a convict. And so I decided to become a man.
So there had to be some resentment, post-traumatic stress, whatever label you want to put on it, when you think about being in a situation that you recount as being a bystander, but you're getting a life sentence. Describe for us the bitterness that could have set in for you and what was motivating that.
They threw me to the wolves. They had nothing for me. No one there to be able to help me decode what was going on. An 18-year-old kid behind bars and having to suffer without anyone, with no help. You know, while there, you know, my mother, who eventually got off drugs, became my hero. And became my biggest cheerleader and fighter to help me with my freedom. She died, and while I was there, and I thought I was gonna die one day, when the grief really hit me, that my mother, who I longed to be with all of my life, and eventually got clean, and right before I got incarcerated, and she was there every step of the way to help me and to help my children, and I lost her. You know, that was a very painful time for me. I lost my grandmothers, both of my grandmothers, my uncles and aunts dying in there, with no type of grief counseling, no type of help whatsoever, you know, and so it was a very trying time.
And no closure, just deal with it and grow up basically on your own.
On your own.
So let's fast forward to 2018.
Okay.
Tell us what happened then.
By that time, I had transformed my life. I got my GED, and I was able to go to college, and I became a part of Gospel Against AIDS when I was on the inside. I became a board member. I raised money for it. I became a part of the Detroit branch NAACP, and I became a part of the church to be able to do everything that I could to transform my life.
Tell us what happened then.
On the last day of the legislative year, in the evening time, Governor Snyder eventually commuted my sentence. The life without the possibility of parole sentence was wiped away by a stroke of a pen. I found out that my sentence was commuted because I was working and serving, as I served for many years inside the Michigan Department of Corrections at the Ryan Correctional Facility. And recognizing that service is the rent we pay for the space that we occupy. And it was announced on the radio, on WWJ radio, that Governor Snyder had commuted the sentence of 26 people. They didn't say my name, but I went down to the officer station, and the officer was on the computer. I asked the officer to pull up the commutations of Governor Snyder. And he pulled up those commutations, and he strolled to the bottom of the list. My name was the last name on the list. A lot of people say because my name was Woods and my last name started with a W. But I said the first would be last and the last would be first. I wept like a baby. I went back into the office where the GED instructor was at. I took her in the back room and showed her the paper and wept. Both of us wept like a baby because she had a strong prayer for me to get out of there. She was very supportive of me. Reverend Wendell Anthony and so many other leaders in this community was very, very supportive. Even Mayor Mike Duggan advocated to the warden that we need to get this man out of prison. And that was the time that my victory was assured. And so got commuted on the last day of the legislative year. And then on 212, the first 3 digits of the prison number that they gave me was 212. On Lincoln's birthday, 2/12/2019, I walked out of prison a free man, running into the arms of the 1-year-old son that I left, who became 30 years old. He came to retrieve his dad out of prison.
How'd that make you feel?
It made me feel absolutely ecstatic. A young man who I had the chance to father while I was incarcerated, a young man who I taught him the values and the principles of life, a young man who I helped get through college without owing one dime, graduating from Michigan State University. We was able to get enough scholarships to be able to help him be able to be successful there. A young man who I helped get a job at the university with Dr. Carl Taylor, a young man who is a powerful speaker in this country right now, and a young man who is a man of God, a man of principle, and a man of integrity. And not only him, my daughter who graduated from nursing, my daughter who has her own business, my daughter who's also thriving in the Lord and doing great things out here. I was blessed to be able to father them while I was in prison, because I told you I was at a fork in the road. Either I was going to be a man and a father, or I was going to be a prisoner and a convict. And I never allowed them to define me as a prisoner. I didn't allow that badge of disgrace that I wore for 29 years, that blue and orange uniform, to define who I was. But I was a freedom fighter, and I fought the good fight, and God blessed me tremendously.
So with all the turmoil and going back and forth with your legal woes, and even with your triumphs, you still don't seem to have fallen to that root of bitterness while you were incarcerated. Why do you think that is?
Because my grandmother prayed for me. She had me on her mind. She took the time to pray for me. And I had so many people praying for me, and I answered the call of ministry while I was there. This 8th grade dropout, again, I told you, learn how to read by reading the Bible and law books. And I read the Bible from Genesis to Revelations and from Revelations to Genesis. And the word became alive in me. And so I wasn't serving God for a get out of jail free card. But when I was able to take my eyes off my problem and put it on the problem solver, I had peace that surpasses all understanding.
If you're having any kind of mental health crisis, we can help. At Team Wellness Crisis Centers, you'll be seen immediately, stabilized in our own private facility, and given all the care you need to get better. Don't wait. Call the Team Wellness Helpline at 1-888-813-TEAM. It could be your lifeline.
Anxiety, depression can happen to anyone for all kinds of reasons, especially during difficult and trying times that no one should have to go through alone. At Team Wellness, trained, compassionate, caring professionals will get you into the right treatment so you get better. Team Wellness. You are not alone.
Now we're in 2018.
Yes.
What happens next?
I just began the journey of building my life and doing the things that I need to do to make a living for myself, but also to be a blessing to this community. And so I started my journey in going into the schools. I went into the juvenile facilities. I was working with an organization called GrowthWorks, because GrowthWorks was bringing young people to our program in there, so they wanted me to connect with some of their young people on juvenile probation, and so we did that. Eventually, I got appointed by the governor to the State Appellate Defenders Commission, and so I'm a Commissioner Woods now, and so I sit on a board that oversee all criminal appeals in the state of Michigan, and then by the Wayne County Commission, I got appointed to DWIN's, Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network, Substance Use Disorder Board. And I have to say that that is one of the most phenomenal organizations in this country.
We at Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network feel privileged to have Daryl on our Substance Use Disorder Board, working with us to help people, all people, get the resources and tools they need to raise awareness of mental health issues and to combat stigma surrounding mental illness. DWIN is the largest community mental health agency in the state of Michigan, serving 123,000 people in Wayne County. Our services cover a wide range, including substance use disorder, suicide prevention, autism, and targeted resources for people with disabilities. We also offer special services for children with serious emotional disturbances. Our newly expanded Crisis Care Center will add 36 beds to DWIN's Crisis Continuum, which will house adults and adolescents on different floors to provide short-term crisis intervention and stabilization services. We also recently launched our mobile units to help people in crisis wherever they are in Wayne County. We're proud to say that we were recently voted one of the top workplaces in Michigan by the Detroit Free Press. At Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network, working with dedicated people like Daryl Woods, our goal is to ensure that through our provider network, help, support, and hope are always available for treatment, prevention, and recovery anywhere in Metro Detroit.
So Daryl, with all the time you spent in prison, you did not get the advantage of having a therapist for yourself or dealing with it in a formal sense, yet you're advocating those same services and treatments for people now. How do you account for that?
Because I know what we need. Absolutely, mental health services is vitally important. It's not only vitally important for those who are incarcerated, but even the prison guards, they need therapy because that's a very traumatic situation to be in. And since I've been out, one of the first things I did was to make sure that I connected with a therapist. And so I have a beautiful therapist that I work with anytime I need and on a consistent basis, and she checks in with me. I'm an elder at the church at Greater Grace Temple, but I have a therapist because I believe that it's vitally important that we seek out counseling. You know, that is a stigma in our community, and we need to dispel that myth. We need to spread the word that there's not anything wrong with talking with someone. This is something that's very much needed in our community, and that's why I'm so appreciative of DWIN, Team Wellness, and all of the organizations that are doing the work to be able to bring healing in our community. And I say to this community and to us as a community, let's not be bitter, let's be better. Let's do everything that we can to love on each other and bring healing and restoration in our community.
My job was causing me so much stress.
I felt disconnected and frightened.
I felt so isolated.
I was beginning to feel trapped, depressed. I never expected that to happen to me.
We think nobody else feels the pain that we feel, but that is so untrue.
It's good to be able to talk about it.
I was able to seek help. I found it from Team Wellness.
It's a sense of freedom.
Team Wellness Center. You are not alone.
Thank you for joining us today as we learn through the amazing personal story of Daryl Woods how to turn your life around from bitterness and blame to being and getting better. If you'd like to learn more about this or any mental health issue, visit us on our website at myhealthymind.com, on Facebook at My Healthy Mind Show, or on Twitter. We'll see you next week for another edition of My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it. Be sure to like and subscribe for more episodes of My Healthy Mind.
Until recently, people in psychiatric crisis had very few options. Basically, they could be taken to a hospital emergency room and inpatient treatment, or to jail. But now, there's a better way. Team Wellness Psychiatric Urgent Care Center of Metro Detroit, an official certified community behavioral health clinic. What this means is that now, people experiencing any kind of mental health or substance abuse crisis can be taken immediately and directly into treatment at our safe, certified crisis stabilization unit, to be immediately assessed, stabilized, and triaged by our team of intake medical doctors and psychiatrists, to undergo intensive psychiatric therapy for up to 23 hours in one of our private or semi-private rooms, to be fully evaluated for short-term care and given a warm handoff into proper ongoing treatment, and to receive continuing long-term clinical and peer support services based on a thorough, thoughtful discharge plan drawn up case by case. For those in the throes of a substance abuse crisis, our response would be the effective, evidence-based practice for treating substance abuse, including Suboxone. In cases of attempted suicide, certified suicide prevention specialists are on call, and our mobile crisis response team ready for dispatch. In any mental health emergency, our Psych Urgent Care unit is open 24/7 to receive and treat those in crisis. And in all these cases, law enforcement can bring subjects to Team Wellness to divert from jail or the emergency room. This kind of direct access will save time and save lives. Team Wellness Psychiatric Urgent Care. Certified, safe.